Well, it's Mother's Day weekend, and I've been thinking about what I can get my wife, who is the best mom on the planet to our 3 kids. So it's got to be good. I was thinking maybe a massage. No. Maybe some roses. Nah, she only likes flowers as a surprise, not for special occasions. What about a robe or some pajamas? I got it. Maybe I can get her a new left tackle and she can donate him to the New Orleans Saints. You think she would go for that? Anybody out there got 15 mil they can loan me? No? Oh, well, we'll have to keep on thinking about it, and we'll do that next with Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports, coming up next on the Dattitude podcast.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? And hello to my friends elsewhere, everywhere out there who have not yet made their reservations for Sunday brunch. Man, there ain't much left. I mean, you got to go out there and do your thing. Did I just remind you it's Mother's Day? I think you can hear a few of you out there going, oh, crap, is that this weekend? Oh, man, get it together. At least you didn't forget it is Dattitude, episode number 237, brought to you by Evangeline Securities for a Friday, May the 10th, 2024. You know this already. I am your host, Jim Derry. You can read if you're watching live. If you're just listening, you can't read anything because there's nothing on the screen. But you know that I am Jim Derry. And whether you're watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or listening to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being a part of the show and of the Dattitude family. Mother's Day. Mother's Day weekend. How many of you numbskulls out there didn't remember? My daughter Ella is a very creative one, and she made these. And I don't want to put it too close to my face because you could. It's in case you can't see it, it's a flower. If you're listening to the podcast, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But if you're watching here on the screen, it's a flower pen. There's a pen at the bottom there. You can't see that. Whatever. But it's got a green wrapped around it, so the green screen is coming through. But trust me, it is. She made a bouquet of these things for my wife and her teachers, by the way. I just thought this was so cool. She asked me if I would show it on the show, and I said, of course, I'm going to show it on the show. Got a very creative daughter. In just a few minutes, we're going to be bringing in another creative dude, Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. He covers the Saints for Fox 8 Sports. Just a few minutes, we'll be talking about the Saints' quandary on the offensive line. You like that word, quandary? And get his thoughts. Look, one thing that's great about Sean that he does as well as anybody, or maybe better than anybody else, is he likes to go through game film throughout the year, and he'll have little segments on their shows on Fox 8 after the news and on the Overtime podcast that he does. He and Larry Holder are the best at going through game film. So we're going to have him on to talk about the offensive line. We're going to be talking more about the discussion about the Saints schedule that we started on Wednesday. I will show him the quote-unquote ideal schedule that I had put together a couple days ago here on the show, get him his thoughts. And we're going to talk about the most important and most intriguing opponents. Some comments already. Jerry, you here? Shout out to all the moms out there. Absolutely. You know what to do if you want to be a part of this show. I'm going to tell you in just a minute. As we have been doing lately, also, the extra point is a look back in time. Very important moment in New Orleans sports history. Maybe a top 5 moment or so. 22 years ago on this date, when then Charlotte Hornets owners George Shinn and Ray Wooldridge announced that they were relocating their team and that the NBA was coming back to the Crescent City. Big deal. I was the assistant sports editor at the Times-Picayune back then. I remember wondering, and I know a lot of people did too, Why will they make it this time? Will they make it this time? But they did. We're here 22 years later. They're no longer the Hornets. They're the Pelicans. But they're here. And, man, things could have been a lot different if they did not come here. So that's our extra point. Looking forward to that. As always, if you are watching live, as I just said, you can be a part of the show by typing in your comment or question on YouTube, Facebook, X, wherever you're watching. We will show it on the screen. Gabe's going to screen it first so I don't do something stupid or read something stupid. If you're listening after the fact on any number of places, including Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, you can send in a comment via email at jderry@theadvocate.com. And a reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page. Click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. Talking about all kinds of stuff. I almost messed up. All kinds of stuff this morning. Dylan. Who dat, baby? Good morning. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. And glad to have everybody else who is watching. Man, I'll tell you what. The show we had Wednesday, the Pearl River show, man, it was our most watched / listened to show of the year in 2024 so far. I'm not kidding. So thank you to all of you. It was a long one. So I look, I really do. I try to keep these things, cut them down a little bit, but sometimes I get a little excited about things. But whatever, you guys liked it. Most watched show of 2024 so far. And it's still counting. What's going on this weekend besides Mother's Day? Paul Skeens. You know Paul Skeens. He is pitching. He's got called up, or he's going to get called up, whatever it is. I guess he probably hadn't officially got called up yet. Going to be called up and pitch for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And hard to believe. Dude was just last year this time, he was pitching for the LSU Tigers, about to help pitch them to a national championship. Less than a year. You know how hard that is to do? It doesn't happen often. Those of you who follow baseball and Major League Baseball, you know it doesn't happen very often. But Paul Skeens will be pitching for the Pittsburgh Pirates versus the Cubs on Saturday. The bad news is for you fans out there, you can only watch it on MLB TV. Paul Skeens versus the Cubs on MLB TV. We will have Cade Beloso on the show Monday. He'll talk about that. We'll talk about LSU baseball. Maybe I'll ask him some Saints questions. Who knows? We're going to get to the Saints, I promise. But before we bring in our friend Sean Fazende, let me tell you about our friends at Evangeline Securities. If you have been listening to us the past few weeks, then you know our friends Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt are managing directors at Evangeline, which is a local company founded in 2014 that can help you. If you're beginning to think about selling your small to mid-sized business, neither Sean nor I nor Gabe Henderson, we're not selling our businesses. We don't. Maybe one day Dattitude will grow. Who knows? And we'll ask Nick and Ron, and although NOLA.com would probably have a problem with that. That's a whole different story. Look, maybe grandpa built a company and then your dad took over, right? Now you've been running things for quite a few years and you're just not sure if there are other things you'd rather do in life. That's you? Check out Evangeline Securities. There aren't a better group of people who can help you and inform you of what your options are better than Nick and Ron. They are fully licensed, registered brokers who grew up in New Orleans, graduated from Jesuit, graduated from some of the finest business schools in the country, and spent many years in the Big Apple business world before coming back home. And the thing is with them is they came back to New Orleans because they care about people like you who are ready to turn to the next chapter of your life. They stressed that to me. When we met, they stressed they came back to New Orleans because they care about the people of this city. And I'm going to tell you more about how they can help you later in the show before we get to the extra point. Meanwhile, check them out at www.evangelinesecurities.com. Okay, it is time to bring in our guest, and I'm looking forward to it. I haven't talked to Sean in quite a while, and Sean Fazende, welcome to the Dattitude podcast brought to you by Evangeline Securities. Sean Fazende is the Saints beat reporter for Fox 8 Sports and host of the Overtime podcast. Sean, what's going on this morning?
What's going on? Greetings from my kitchen table here. Hope the background's doing okay for you. I'm doing great. Good to be here on this Friday, May 10th. Man, this 2024 is moving right along. Huh?
It really is.
Almost that time, which is crunch time for us. But yeah, it's been been a fun stretch so far.
I always talk about how we go to sleep in August and we wake up and it's January. I mean, for us now, it's so much different than it was even like 10 years ago. I mean, it's nonstop now. I mean, we get a couple weeks here and there to take vacation and actually reunite ourselves with our families. But other than that, we are nonstop these days, and people want to talk about football 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife always tells me, she kind of keeps track of how many off seasons. I say, man, this off season's busy as it's ever been. Man, this off season's busy as it's ever been. I feel like this is the busiest off season I've ever had. She just kind of laughs and shouts, goes, it's
whatever.
Every off season. It just keeps getting busier and busier.
Yeah, she says whatever because my wife says the same. My wife doesn't even listen to me anymore. But it is Mother's Day weekend, so we will be treating them this weekend. Rookie mini camps, all kinds of things going on coming up. It'll be OTAs before we know it. And training camp is just a little over 2 months away, 2.5 months away. That's crazy thought, but here we are. And we got a couple comments again. If you want to come comment on, you know how to do it. Jerry says, welcome to Sean. Nathaniel. Derek Carr gets hurt like he did last year. All right, we'll start off with this instead of the offensive line. I'll let you answer this. If Derek Carr gets hurt like he did last year, will Spencer Rattler get a shot? I'm not sure what that part is, but do you think Spencer Rattler is going to be the backup quarterback? We're just, 2 weeks after the draft, so it's hard to predict that. But what are your thoughts on Spencer Rattler?
I think he's got a shot to be the number 2 this year. I think that's why they drafted him. First off, they drafted him because he was so high on their draft board. He couldn't ignore him at pick 150. It's the lowest rated list that I saw where he was in terms of his graded prospect was 89. So you talk about 89, even if that were the case, the Saints are in that ballpark. The 89th graded player at 150 is great value. And I think they brought him in with the idea that he's going to compete with Jake Haener to be the number 2. They do love Jake Haener. They loved him from the minute he got here a season ago. So they haven't given up on Jake Haener. Going to let these two guys battle it out, bring some competition to that position, bring some competition really to that room as a whole. Now we're getting a little ahead of ourselves from the backup quarterback job to Derek Carr potentially getting hurt at some point to turning to Spencer Rattler in that regard. It's possible. I won't rule it out. But for that to happen, that would have meant there would have been either poor play from Derek Carr or an injury to Derek Carr, which is nothing the Saints want at this point.
Sean, you and I both know fans love to get ahead of themselves, right? So I mean, that's what they do. That's what they do. Look, I'm going to make a prediction that's very unpopular. I understand this. My prediction is Nathan Peterman's going to be the backup quarterback.
Okay.
That's my prediction. But it is May 10th, so maybe I'll change my mind by July. We'll see. All right, look, I want to talk the first part of this show about the offensive line. And, you go through game film, and I talked about this before you got on, but one of the things that I love that you do on all the Fox 8 shows, you guys do a plethora of shows during the season after, at 10:35 after the news is over. And you go through game film. You and Larry Holder can go through game film like nobody else. And I love those segments, and I watch them religiously. What do you see in this offensive line? It's going to be a lot different, obviously. Right now, you got to think Ryan Ramczyk isn't going to be ready. I think any normal person, I think we were reading through the tea leaves, Ryan Ramczyk's not going to be ready. So that probably means Taliese Fuanga is the starting right tackle, which means right now at left tackle, the possibilities at the moment are probably Trevor Penning or Oli Udoh. And unless they go out and sign a free agent, what do you see there? Do you think that the Saints are almost backed into a corner to where they have to sign a free agent? Or do you think they're going to go into the season and say, you know what? We never gave Trevor Penning a real shot. Let's do it again.
If I were making the call, I'm trying to find a veteran player on the market right now that could step in. You mentioned left tackle. I still have concerns about left guard. Who's going to start at left guard? Is it Saldiveri? Is it Oli Udoh, who played, he could play guard, he could play tackle? To me, given what happened to Derek Carr last year when he got banged up, that protecting him should be priority number 1. And at best, absolute best, this is assuming Fuaga comes in from day 1 and is a really good player from the jump. 3 out of 5 are settled. If you're counting on Trevor Penning, which I don't think they've given up on Trevor Penning, but is that the plan? To say Trevor's our guy? I just don't think that's something the Saints could just go into a season just penciling that in. But even if that were the case, who's your left guard? Like I said, at least Penning's got
No
some
idea.
snaps. Nick Saldiveri doesn't have any snaps, and Oli Udoh is a kind of a sixth spot starter, reserve type offensive lineman. So to me, when I look at this offensive line, I still see major concerns because just add it up. I mean, who is your starting five, and are you confident at starting five? And I don't see how they could be confident in that starting five.
Sean, I think one interesting factor is, although Oli Udoh, I think he only has 18 starts under his belt in the NFL. One thing is 16 of those starts came when Clint Kubiak was the offensive coordinator at Minnesota. So obviously there's something that Clint Kubiak sees in Oli Udoh. I'll get that right eventually. By August, it'll just roll off the tongue. But he sees something there. So maybe he does have a chance to get that spot.
Well, if there's confidence there in him and he's played that position and Kubiak has that connection to him, then, maybe that's just something that they have knowledge of that we just don't, because we don't have much knowledge of Oli Udoh other than the fact that he has a connection to Clint Kubiak. So if that is indeed the case and that's the plan and they feel more confident about it, good for them. And hopefully that's what that it works itself out to where, he can be a legitimate 1/5 of your starting offensive line. Okay, so if we have that settled, are we still going left tackle Trevor Penning? So you see what I'm saying? There's always who settles in where, and is that player good enough? And I'm just afraid they do not have enough to pencil anyone in the way you have confidence. That's why to me, you have to add a veteran offensive lineman that's available.
Nate Sherman says Trevor Penning will be an All-Pro. Bet on it.
I hope so. And the Saints certainly drafted him to be.
I bet on a lot of things. I don't think I'm going to bet on that one. But hey, Nate, if that happens, you know what? Maybe I'll have you on the show because you see something that no one else does. I agree with you wholeheartedly I think that they have to bring in a veteran. Mm-hmm. And, there are 3 guys out there that Luke Johnson was talking about and you guys have talked about, but David Bakhtiari, is that, obviously he's been injured a lot of the past few years. Bringing someone like that in, I think really could help that room.
Yeah, my co-host on the podcast, Andre Johnson Jr., he's been all over it with Bakhtiari. That's his guy when it comes to the left tackle. And when you talk about Bakhtiari, at peak prime of his career, before he was battling injuries, he was the offensive lineman's offensive lineman. You ask offensive linemen around the league, who was the best tackle in the league, all of them point to Bakhtiari. So if he's even 80 or 90% of that and relatively clean bill of health, then I think that would make a lot of sense. And you would think he's probably about 31, 32 years old. Yeah. You probably think at this point it would be relatively cheap for a 1-year deal because that's generally where the Saints have gone. So Bakhtiari would make sense. I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that because that's at least someone you can say, okay, he's been there, he's done that. We can at least pencil him in for now, and then we can see what happens and feel a little bit better about the totality of that group, as if you have, enough players to really fill that starting five.
Also, bringing in a veteran like that, Sean, I think would also help a guy like Trevor Penning, right? Mm-hmm. If they haven't given up on – look, Trevor Penning's going to be here for 2 more years unless he just completely falls apart. I mean, he's under his rookie contract. Mm-hmm. There's no need to cut him unless he's just wasting a roster spot, which they're not – I mean, that's silly to think that. So if a veteran like that can come in and maybe help Penning progress, I've been as critical of Penning as anyone. But, I mean – if you can get a veteran like that in the door and help this guy learn how to play left tackle, who knows? I mean, you can't rule it out.
No. And I think the Saints would be not looking out for what's best in the organization if they just ignore that option and just say, you know what, we're going to roll it with Penning. We think he's got it, and he's just going to be our guy. Look, in the perfect world, that's what happens through a genuine competition or through his natural growth and development as a player. But as we sit here on May 10th, given what he showed you last season, that to me, that's just not a smart way to go about it.
Agree wholeheartedly. All right, Don says new OC, new line coach, maybe better Penning. Hey, I agree 100%. With that for sure. I mean, look, I think you have to go into this season. If you're a fan, you have to go into the season believing that this new coaching staff is going to make a difference. I mean, I'm trying not to be – look, in the offseason, I'm trying to be as positive as possible, seriously. And I think that you have to go into this as a fan as positive as possible as well. It can't be any worse, I don't think, on offense last year with what they went through. And I just think they're going to be rejuvenated. And with this experienced assistant staff I think they can be much better.
And I think if you are looking for the big change, the big reason for optimism, because every other move has been kind of moderate moves. You talk about the free agency moves, who they lost, who they gained. But what's the big jolt? What's the big change? What's the big shock? Well, it's a whole new system, offensive system, whole new way, whole new offensive line coach, whole new offensive coordinator, new quarterback coach, all that stuff. So it's very reasonable to think that a fresh set of eyes, a new staff, a new way of looking at things, a new approach, a player like Trevor Penning could certainly grow and be productive in that. And look, there are certain things, and look, I'm going through the 2023 tape right now, offensive tape. I'm through week 6 when Trevor Penning was playing a lot. There were moments he would dominate guys, especially in the run game. So if you're looking at where can you grow from last year to this year, if there's a more cohesive line of scrimmage and if they can run the ball more effectively, which they were like 22nd or 21st last year in the run game, which is what the Kubiak system is. It's all about the diversity in the run game. Then I think that's a reason for some form of optimism and positivity heading into the Saints off-season program and into training camp, just because that's the biggest change. And hopefully that's the biggest change for the better.
Dylan has a question that I don't know the answer to, and I'd like to get your opinion on it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'll click on the right button here. Mm-hmm. Why would they not bring Peat back?
Yeah. We did a whole podcast on this yesterday. I thought he was a guy that made a lot of sense. You talk about, you still don't know left tackle or left guard. Well, this guy's played both. I understand it's a new system. I understand he's a little bit older, and I understand maybe there's a thought about, he just doesn't quite fit the profile we like in terms of quicker, more agile offensive lineman. But here you are, you still have the same issues. You still have the same musts. You still have the same needs up front along the offensive line. So I can just – he's been available all this time up until this week. So the only thing I can think of is he just wasn't one the new offensive coaching staff liked, because to me that was an obvious one to bring back. Even if he doesn't make the final roster, so what? Bring him back to at least give yourself enough options at that position, because you've got to get that starting 5 right.
I think that's the only thing that makes sense. Agreed. Here on this Friday morning, the Dattitude podcast presented by Evangeline Securities. Just like Dattitude, you can find the Overtime podcast wherever you get your podcast. Go check it out. Sean Fazende and company. You guys are on like episode number 400 and something now, right?
Oh, I think we're a little over 500 now.
Oh, 500.
Yeah, we're rolling right along. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday we put one out.
Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Check out the Overtime podcast. All right. I want to move on to, the schedule is going to be released next Wednesday. And we take a look, and in a second, I'm going to show you my quote unquote ideal schedule if you're a Saints fan, because I put a mock one together. But if you look at these opponents, okay, even though if you go by just their records from last year, it's still somewhere around, 485 or somewhere around there. It's below 500. But this schedule is so much different than last year. It's so much tougher than last year. Just the road games alone, sure, you play your division opponents, and that's why if you look at it, why the opponents' records are so bad, because 6 of them are teams in your division. They stunk. But Dallas, Green Bay, Kansas City on the road is brutal. If those 3 teams are anywhere close to each other, that is going to be brutal. Philadelphia at home. Cleveland at home. We forget how good Cleveland is. And the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton, and you know how much he's going to want to come back and win here. Just this schedule is, again, because the opponent's record, it makes it look easier than it is. It's going to be like 22nd or 23rd. To me, it's much tougher than that. Much
tougher. And going off last year's schedule, last year's record of those opponents, the NFC South is going to be better this year, just by the nature
Agreed.
Of Kirk Cousins / Michael Penix Jr. heading into the NFC South. Carolina isn't going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be better. I mean, they have no choice. They're going to be better next year. So the NFC South is going to be much tougher. Going to Kansas City, I mean, come on. That's just one of probably the toughest place to play in the NFL right now. Denver coming here to New Orleans. I think if Sean Payton went 1-16, but the one win was against the Saints, I think he have a little bit of happiness there, just because that's just how he is. That's just how he is. And look, they seem to have never matched up well, at least recently, when it comes to Philadelphia. Going to play the Chargers on the road, the West Coast, and then having the Rams come here. So you're talking about a much tougher schedule with a much more respected class of quarterback they're going to have to face week in and week out.
Breaking news here real quick. Malik Neighbors, speaking of Saints opponents, the New York Giants, Malik Neighbors officially signs his rookie deal, 4 years, $29.2 million guaranteed with an $18.1 million signing bonus and 50-year option. Thank you, Gabe Henderson, for that news. Yeah, I mean, the Sean Payton thing is going to be a spectacle. I mean, it's going to be crazy that week. And, that'll be one that people want. That's got to be a Monday game, right?
That's got to be a primetime game. There's no doubt about that. Sean Payton still moves the needle when it comes to NFL, even when he's not doing well, like issues with Russell Wilson and, always having some kind of comment in the media, always trying to do something. I was joking with Jeff Duncan, your guy, and our guy too. I was like, man, when you're not the greatest coach in the organization's history, like he was here in the Saints, those jokes aren't quite as funny with the media.
Right.
As he was trying to joke that he lured the Vikings into trading up one spot, whatever it was. He wanted to get him to think that so he can get Bo Nix. And I think he was expecting some kind of laughter, some kind of genius thing. And that wasn't the case. But I just think Denver, Saints, Superdome, a lot of emotion. And Sean Payton is the type that likes to, he's got a little pettiness to him. So I think he's going to, he'll like the idea of wanting to stick it to his former team, even though he has nothing but respect, obviously, for the Saints. I think that is worthy of either a Sunday night or a Monday night game.
I agree. It's got to be one of those, I think. Eric Geller says the Rams. Yeah, we didn't even mention the Rams and how tough they're going to be. They may end up being the favorite in the NFC West. I mean, I know that San Francisco is defending NFC champs, but you know what? I think the Rams got a whole lot better as well, and that's going to be an interesting division.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see how their defense navigates around the retirement of Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
Stafford, I've always felt was a little bit underrated as a quarterback.
Agreed.
I know he had the injury issues, but he seemed to battle through towards the end of last year. And McVay is just that good of a coach. He just knows how to figure it out with the pieces that he has. And they come to New Orleans this year, so that could be one of those games where, I don't know, have they played since no call? I think they have.
Well, they played last year in LA, not here.
I mean,
no, they played here. They played here 2 years ago, and Stafford was hurt. Remember? And
That's
Saints,
right. He was hurt. That's
him.
correct.
Saints
That's right.
beat him.
He was hurt. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I could see that being one of the games where they look at it and say, yeah, that's potential for prime time. I don't know what kind of buzz the Saints have nationally when it comes to that primetime light, and if they're worthy of the primetime spotlight like they were in the Drew Brees era.
No, I think you're looking at, I said this the other day, I think last year they had 3, and 2 of them were Thursday games.
Yeah.
I think that you're looking at something similar this year. Maybe not 2 Thursday games, we'll see. But I think that you're going to get a Monday game, because you always do. Monday Night Football loves coming to New Orleans. Again, I really think that's the Denver game. You're going to get a Thursday game. Maybe it's Dallas the week after Thanksgiving, or even Thanksgiving. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then who knows what the other one might be. Nate says, watch out. I guess if there's a football god, Deshaun Watson can't play whatever week the Saints play the Browns. That would be interesting.
That could be interesting, but I just don't think the NFL schedule makers are going to plan around a potential Jameis Winston reunion or a rematch game against the Saints. That a lot would have to happen in that regard. But I do think that matchup is going to be an interesting one because of the Deshaun Watson connection here. I mean, people forget how close they came to signing and trading for Deshaun Watson. And, obviously you have the connection with Jameis Winston, but I wouldn't think that gets to the level of let's put these 2 teams on prime time.
No, but Nate's right. If there is a football god and Deshaun Watson misses 1 game all year, that would be an interesting one to miss. Chris Kennedy is super positive. He says the Saints are going 17-0 and going to the Super Bowl.
Man, give me some of that, man. Give me some of that positivity. I need some of that in my life. 17-0 Super Bowl. I'll take it, man. I'll take it.
All right. I put together the other day, a quote unquote ideal schedule. Okay. And my thinking before I show this is I think this Saints team, maybe more than any other, at least as of late, you can't say any other ever, but any other as of late needs to have an easier schedule, easier start so they can get some confidence under their belt and get some cohesiveness and start out maybe, realistically, I think if they want to go to the playoffs, got to win 10 games, I think you need a 6-2 start, is my opinion. Okay. So to do that, I put together, and not being unrealistic of what the schedule could be, here's my ideal schedule. And we got to remember that there are some people listening after the fact on a podcast. So I'm going to have to go through these, and so they know what we're talking about. But so starting out with Carolina, you got to go on the road at the Giants, at Tampa Bay. Remember, this is a 9-home game year unless the NFL decides to take one away and sends them to Europe, which is a possibility. But anyway, this start Carolina at the Giants, at Tampa Bay, then home for Washington, and then that Monday night game home for Denver. So, Sean, do you agree with me, first of all, that it is important for the Saints to have the tougher teams towards the back end so they can get a little confidence and cohesiveness, or do you think it doesn't matter?
No, I think that's been the history of this organization. Fast starts usually equals postseason, at least since 2006. If you really look at the history of this franchise, at least in the more recent history of this franchise, if you can somehow get to a point where, out of the first, usually I used to think of the first 4 games, it would be 3-1 or better. They would generally they were on a roll and they figured it out enough. They survived the unknown of the first part of the season enough to figure it out. And then they generally figure out who they are and they become themselves by the second half of the season while not digging themselves in that early hole. I go back to last year, all things being equal, they win the Green Bay game. I think they win the division, they go to the playoffs. That was the only game last year that the team that played the best did not win that game on the Saints schedule. Every other outcome of every other game, the team that deserved to win, the team that deserved to lose, won or lost that game, except Green Bay. You know what happens. Carr got hurt. They made a late rally. Was it 17 points?
17-0.
Yeah,
up 17-0 going in the fourth quarter.
Going into the fourth, it was like the final 8 minutes of the game. They rally. All things being equal, I think that reshapes the whole narrative and the whole feel of the entire season. And that was week 3 because you're 3-0, feeling a little good about yourself. Maybe there isn't a rush to bring Derek Carr back week 4 against Tampa Bay, although he seems like the type that wants to come back after an injury.
Don't get me started on that.
And even at worst, if you win that game and you lose the following week at Tampa Bay, a division game, you're still 3-1. And I just think all things, if everything went exactly the same except for that game, I think you're talking about a playoff team the season ago. So I'm right there with you when it comes to a fast start. In particular, there's going to be a feeling out. People just kind of overlook this, and there's that survive September mode where you're not who you are. You have to survive working things out as a team and figuring out who you are. And generally speaking, if you can survive that and have a winning record when you come out of September, early October, you generally have a good chance to make the playoffs on the back end.
Oh, I agree. And look, to me, again, this is ideal, but you can't expect that they're all the easy games going to be. There's no such thing as the easy game. I get it. But the easier opponents, I guess the more manageable opponents, I guess is the way you should put it. They're not all going to be together. So the first also going in week 6 at Kansas City, week 7 home for Vegas, week 8 at Atlanta, week 9 Cleveland before a bye week. But to me, if you look at this,
bye week, by the way, I love
that'd be a perfect time for a bye week, right?
That bye week.
So if you go through that and you say, okay, you look at those 9 games, and I think the Saints would have a realistic chance to be 6-3, right? I mean, you go through that, and if they're 6-3, then you got to go. You got to win 4 out of your last 8 games to win 10 games, which I think is good enough to win this division, even with Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. So to be 6-3 at the bye week, if it is in week 10 or whatever, but after week 9, after your 9th game, I think that would give the Saints a ton of momentum and have, the fans excited, give a whole different mentality to this team. Nobody's talking about DA getting fired. Nobody's talking about, I hate Derek Carr. None of that stuff. We don't have to hear any of that stuff that the Saints are 6-3 as we go into November.
Yeah. And I man, if you got to 6-3 by November, maybe just this disgust type feeling that's kind of infected the fan base right now. Because look, the fan base is in this like post-glory year state where they kind of feel like the best is over and the glory years are over and you're just kind of left with the remnants. If you could somehow get to 6-3, feeling good through November into December onto the back half of your schedule, I think that would just kind of revive this fan base a little bit and maybe spin the narrative a little bit on Derek Carr. Because man, I hate that I feel like I'm the Derek Carr defender in the local media.
You're not the only one.
I see flaws in his game, but for the life of me, the level of vitriol versus what he actually had on the field to me is just so out of whack. But nonetheless, if they can get to 6-3, he's playing decent ball. The system's working. They're running the football. I think the vibes change, and there's a little bit more of an acceptance there that I think could do everybody a little good.
I'm going to take a quick break from this ideal schedule because I want to touch on something you just said, and because it bothers me. When look, I've been critical at times of Derek Carr, but a lot of it has to do when I thought he shouldn't have played and they should have used Jameis Winston. That's a whole different story. But I think by all accounts, the Saints had one of the 4 or 5 worst offensive lines in football last year. I don't think there's really debating that, honestly, by their play. And so with that, Derek Carr was still the 12th best quarterback in football last year. If this offensive line is even average or slightly below average, that 12 goes to 9 or 10 easily. And that's all this team needs. If you get an average or maybe just below average, 18th ranked offensive line, and Derek Carr moves to 8, 9, or 10, you're talking about a team that, of course, is playoff bound. And, that leads into a question by Glenn. Sean, what do you think about the Saints checking out some tackles from the UFL on Fox, by the way?
Yeah, it's possible. That league's gotten a little bit better.
Much better.
Watched a couple games last weekend. I'm for certain Saints scouts have their eyes on that league right now because you just never know who could be available and who might be able to translate. Only thing I would say is I wouldn't have a problem with it. I don't know if anyone you would get from there you can pencil in as a starter. And right now I'm looking for a veteran that I could pencil in as a starter. And if he gets beaten out, so be it. But if you want to bring a guy in as a depth piece and see how he develops from the UFL, I would have no problem with that.
Chris asks, is Coach Gruden coming to the Saints?
Wow. Well, he was around camp last year, and then there was all kind of rumors about him being the next OC. It didn't happen. I could see it being a similar situation last year where he kind of pops in and sees what's up. I know he's working with Jake Haener, but as a full member of the coaching staff, I haven't heard anything about that yet.
Questions and comments all over the place this morning. Jerry, did y'all hear the NFL Christmas Days will potentially be on Netflix? I have not heard that. Have you heard that?
I have not. Have you?
I have not. So well, I tell you what, Jerry, I will look that up over the weekend, and I will touch it on a Monday. So come back on that. Adam says, a long one here. I'll just read part of it. Absolutely agree on a fast start. 6'3" is a great estimation with what now. And while I ask this question, what later round rookies do you see getting on the field, and what rookies outside of the obvious, the 1-2 guys, Fawanga and Kool-Aid, are we fairly high on? That's an interesting question because I like Jalen Ford. I think he could come in and contribute right away. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter. Obviously, with Willie Gay coming in at linebacker, you're not going to go and start this kid. But I think obviously he's probably going to come in and play on special teams. I think there's almost no question he makes the team. And I think he comes in and is wearing a jersey on opening day.
I think he makes the team. I think he's a guy that's going to embrace special teams as he did it in college. Played a lot of football in college at a high-profile program. I think he's a guy that can work himself into the rotation on the field because DA likes to mix and match personnel groupings based off game plan. And there's certain situations where even if he's not a starter or even the main reserve, he can still get on the field if he has a particular skill set that they can use in a certain situation. So yeah, I think Ford's a guy that can make the roster. I am thoroughly intrigued by the D tackle Christian Boyd because of how thin that group is, and I think they're going to need a fourth D tackle in the rotation just for depth that they have to rely on game days. So, but he's another one from UNI, Northern Iowa.
Right.
What is the learning curve for him? Now, we're not expecting starter status out of him, but can he be a part of the rotation? I think is a very important question to ask, and hopefully that's one that he can develop into something and where he at least be some kind of rotational piece for this defense.
Joe Zyram is excited. Keeps that level of excitement that when he found out he was drafted. Who knows? Maybe him. That would be interesting. Maybe. Chris, I don't think it's as high on. Look, now I put this ideal schedule on here because I think it absolutely matters. I talk about this If they get a tough schedule, I'm going to probably pick them to be below that 7.5 win total at the start, because I think it absolutely matters. But Chris says, y'all very optimistic about that offense. O-line issues and don't know who will be throwing to. Didn't get any real help in free agency for wide receiver help. Sean, I don't think they needed any more help at wide receiver. I know I'm in the minority. I just don't think that there was a big need there. I know there's a lot of number threes. There's a number one, there's a number two, and there's a lot of number threes. And we'll see what comes out of that. But I don't know. Maybe Bob Means can come in and play too. But I actually like the moves they made in free agency at wide receiver. I'm not sure that was needed. They needed to go get higher.
Yeah, I think Wilson can be the guy that can come in, hopefully, as the veteran and maybe settles in. My only issue with the wide receiver group, and we saw some flashes at the end of last year, is every one of those guys, excuse me, ready to bump up one spot. In other words, is Olave ready to take the one? Is Shaheed ready to take the two? Is Perry ready to take the three? And could you add another veteran to that mix? On our podcast, Hunter Renfro's name comes up all the time. I wouldn't have a problem with Hunter Renfro. And here's the thing. I wouldn't just hone in just on wide receiver. Skill playmakers on the edge. When you take the Saints, you compare them to a team like the Lions or the Rams or the 49ers, where they stack up. And I do think there is a case to be made that they could add a playmaker at one of those positions and potentially add some life to that offense. You mentioned something earlier. You said if they just had the average offensive line, they would have been a playoff team. And I'll throw another thing out there, and I alluded to it earlier. If they had a top 16 run game, which kind of got lost last year, and some of that has to do with the offensive line, but some of that has to do with a little bit of, I think, wear and tear and age in the backfield. I think that if you can just boost up that a little bit from 21 to 16, I think that could also be the difference in a playoff and a non-playoff team.
I'm screaming that for months. Glenn says if Carr can get a run game, that will be a great benefit for a 10 to 11 win season. There's no question about it. And we talk about Alvin Kamara being 29 years old. Mm-hmm. And to me, when you see that number, that's the beginning of decline. I'm not saying Alvin Kamara isn't going to be, a solid running back, because I wouldn't say that. I think he still has gas in the tank. But as much as he's been used, I don't think we can expect to see the Alvin Kamara from 3 years ago. I just don't think you got to be realistic. Jamal Williams didn't show me anything. So you have to hope Kendra Miller is going to be the back that they thought they would draft, and you didn't get to see a lot of him last year because he was hurt for a lot of the time.
Yeah, I know they're high on him, and there's a group of these second year guys that they're really hoping make that leap from year one to year two. And if that were to happen, maybe you do feel more confidence in this group, but we don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, I'm not just limited. I'm talking about Foskey. I'm talking about Miller, Saldiveri. We talked about him. If those guys can make a leap, then maybe we are talking about something different. But yeah, I do think there were times last year where it really showed up with Kamara, that making guys mix second and third level wasn't quite there as much as it used to be. I still think he'd be effective. And I also think if you really just watch a lot of film, especially with this Kubiak Shanahan scheme, the sheer creativity of the run game is just unlike anything else, any other system in the NFL. And hopefully that can allow, a guy like Kamara, Jamal Williams, and I think Kendra Miller, more productivity and hopefully just more production just as a whole, as a run game, I think can certainly help this offense going forward, which in turn could help the entire team go, get past 9-8 from season.
If the run game gets going, that's another thing that's going to help Carr get into the top 10 as well. David says, can Peyton Turner please find his health emoji? Yeah, well, that's a whole different story, whole different show. Yeah. Taylor says, with Kubiak's scheme, there's going to be a bigger emphasis at the tight end position. Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau could have big seasons. I don't think Foster Moreau is going to – he's not the kind of tight end that's going to have a big season, but there's no question Juwan Johnson was disappointing last year, and I do think he plays a larger role in this offense.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't really until the back end of the season where it felt like he had kind of figured it out a little bit. But I know there was definitely disappointment within the building in terms of where they thought he was from his, conversion from wide receiver to tight end, second or third year at that position. They thought he was going to take that leap. Didn't quite happen. That position, he's right. This offense, they'd use a lot of multiple tight end sets, a lot of that wide zone, bootleg, tight end drag across the middle type of type plays. So I think it is a tight end friendly offense. Who emerges? And that's why, when I did the mock drafts, I had him picking a tight end in every single one. Everybody was in love with Brock Bowers. I would have had no problem with them taking Brock.
Neither would I.
There was a guy
That's the only one
that I really liked. Now he ended up going in that third and fourth round gap there that they didn't have a pick in. It was Jared Wiley out of TCU.
Right.
There was some tight ends there. I thought they may have addressed that position as well.
I agree. All right. Before I let you go, I do want to get back to the ideal sked part. We had a lot of comments this morning, a lot of questions. Want to get them all on here, and if you write in, we're gonna show it. After that bye week, we talked about the potential of a 6-3 start if they get this schedule again, which is just of the ultimate importance. So then, if you get this schedule and you get 6-3, then you kind of got to run through the gauntlet a little bit. Mm-hmm. They got Philadelphia at home, so that would give the Saints at least 3 straight weeks at home. Cleveland, then the bye week, then Philadelphia, before you go on the road in Green Bay before it gets too icy, and then at the Chargers, the Rams at home, Tampa Bay at home, and then to me, you'd have to win at least 2 out of 3 at Carolina, at Dallas, and home for Atlanta. Dallas, I guess that'd be New Year's week. Yeah. Carolina would be Christmas week. But I just threw this together because we know it's not going to end up like this or whatever. But just your thoughts on a gauntlet that they could face if they get a 6-3 start, or if they get a positive start. I think they'd be more inclined to be able to navigate a tough gauntlet of those games.
Yeah. I'm looking at it there. Like I said, Philly's always been a tough matchup. Green Bay is kind of a coin flip, because I go back to that Cleveland game a couple years ago. It was frigid, and that was their best game.
Yeah, it was.
LA Chargers is a team that, look, with Harbaugh, I think they're going to be much better, but still they've had a reputation for underachieving. Rams have always been a tough matchup. Tampa Bay is always a coin flip. I mean, crazy games always seem to happen. So about Carolina, a place they've had some success recently. At least last year they did. Dallas is an interesting one, because I think Dallas is a good regular season team, and you might be catching them at a wrong time there. So could you go 4-4 the rest of the way with that schedule? I think you'd be right on it. I think that's the best you could do at 4-4. Almost to the point where I'm wondering now that I see your schedule, would it be a little bit better to maybe stagger in a tougher opponent? Not all together in your earlier frame, but maybe stagger it in and maybe survive it, get to 5-4 to maybe have slightly more manageable on the back end.
I think you got a good point. The only thing is, I think maybe even 7-2 would you'd have to go. And I know we're being optimistic, but look, I just thought I'm not as down right now. Look, I still have a sour taste in my mouth again, and that whole apology thing, I'm not going to go into that, but that really, it still bugs me. It's May 10th. It still bugs the hell out of me. And so I hope I'm wrong about where this team is internally. And so I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible right now. But to me, just maybe they can start. I don't know. If you get this kind of schedule, I think you can win 10 games. I just don't know if they get at Green Bay early, if they get at Kansas City early, if they get at Dallas early, and you're talking about all 3 of those games before the bye week. I mean, I don't see how. Then I'm going to feel completely different. I'm going to say, all right, this might be a 6 or 7 win team.
Yeah, and it's the old saying, not who you play when you play.
That's right.
Them, who's available when you play them, who's starting. I mean, that's. I don't think it's any more true in any other sport more than in the NFL.
No doubt.
Just because, I mean, look, when you look at a schedule preseason, it looks a certain way, and then by the time you get to play those teams, it looks like I thought the Bears game was going to be tough last year, and it was. But I thought they were going to be playing Justin Fields, who would have been a tougher matchup for the Saints defense. Turns out they got Tyson Bagent and was able to manage an ugly win, but a win, no doubt. So, yeah, and the schedule thing, it's funny. We moved from mock drafts to mock schedules. It's pretty crazy.
I know.
From the schedule prediction business now. But I always look for primetime games, cold weather games, and where the bye is. So I love a middle of the season bye week, and hopefully, because gosh, you can recall back in 2022. It was like week 16 or week 15 when they had the bye week. And so by the time they got the benefit of it, it was already too late.
Yeah, so, it was December. It was December for sure. I think it was the first week of December.
It was an awful bye week. And so hopefully they catch a break with that as well.
Lastly, before I let you go, wouldn't it be fun to have a home game in the Dome against Atlanta again that actually meant the division title? Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be awesome. No apologies, please. Just go out and
Exactly.
win. And that would be fantastic. I think as frustrated as the fan base has been, if those were the circumstances, they would show up and do exactly what they had to do, what they have to do to help propel this team to victory for a home game.
No more sections of opponents' fans, something we never saw before last year, or at least not since the Saints were really bad when you and I were young.
Yeah.
Though we can't have that again.
That Detroit game, it still sticks in my
it really does, doesn't it?
Look, I go to all the Saints games on the road, and look, I've seen Saints fans take over stadiums, like take it over.
I know.
To see that, I've never seen it at the Dome to that extent. From the opening whistle, from the opening kickoff to the end of the game, that sea of blue at all three levels is just, I mean, they say that picture's worth 1,000 words. It was something just to watch. You know, we're in the press box. We're up high. We see everything. It was just a bowl of blue. It was unbelievable.
That's all we talked about.
I know that caught their attention, so they've got to figure that out.
That's all we talked about. Well, it's been a fun year, Sean. Thank you for spending as much time as you did here on the Dattitude podcast. Check Sean out on the Overtime podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube, right?
Yeah, the Fox 8 Overtime YouTube channel as well.
And Sean Fazende also weeknight shows throughout the week, except I think Tuesday.
No, it's when it's not football season. We have a Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday show. When it is football season, it's every night of the week. I
am going to be with our friend Garland Gillen next Thursday on the final bet, so I'm looking forward to that. Sean Fazende, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
But
love having the Fox 8 guys on here. Again, it's what we do. We reciprocate, right? I mean, they come on my show. Go, that's not why we do it. I mean, we do it because we have fun doing it, actually. But we're all friends here. We all spend a lot of time with each other from August to January. It's just the way that it is. All right, let's move on to the extra point. But I tell you what, before we get to the extra point, I do want to talk about continue my story about my friends at Evangeline Securities. Give me just a sec before you want to hear the extra point today. And I know you want to hear about Evangeline Securities. It's important. Even if you know someone that's thinking about selling their small to mid-sized business, you want to tell them about Evangeline Securities. I told you all about Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt, who came back home after many years at business school and in the Big Apple. They came back home to help the people who matter to them most here in Louisiana. They have offices on Poydras Street, right across from the Dome, and in Lafayette. If you think it might be time for you to sell your business, or even wondering how to start the process or figure out what your business is worth, then you need to check out Evangeline Securities. They will sit down with you and go through your company and run a no-cost to you detailed breakdown, and it won't cost you a dime until you decide you're ready to sell. Then they will run a free, extensive auction process among hand-selected investors from around the world to find the best potential buyer. They will maximize the return process for you and your family, which hopefully will give you the security you need to either move on and do something else with your life, that's something that you've been just wanting to do, or maybe you just want to retire. I want to retire. Nah, I ain't retiring. I got a little kid at home. It ain't happening anytime soon. Whatever the reason, Evangeline Securities can help you get to the goal line. And who doesn't like touchdowns from the hometown team? Hell, if you want to wear a black and gold helmet and scream "Who dat" through the process, I'm sure Nick and Ron won't mind. Check them out at www.evangelinesecurities.com. All right, time for the extra point. This is a fun one. You see I love finding the old papers and making that as kind of our picture. And it's probably too small for you, especially if you're watching a phone. But in this picture, you could see that we did it probably. But that is George Shin. Well, from left to right, Ray Wooldridge, George Shin, who were owners of the Charlotte Hornets and moved them here, and then Mayor Ray Nagin was the new mayor of New Orleans back then. All right, 22 years ago on this date, on May 10th, 2002. Before Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, and Zion Williamson were drafted here in New Orleans. Well, Zion wasn't even 2 years old yet. Basketball fans in and around New Orleans received the gift of a lifetime. The Charlotte Hornets officially announced that they were relocating to the Crescent City. Prior to the announcement, it was anything but a fait accompli. And it actually shocked many in the NBA world. It had been 23 years since the Jazz had packed up and moved to Salt Lake City. And most sports business experts, and even people here in Southeast Louisiana, didn't think New Orleans could support another NBA franchise. Luckily, Superdome general manager Doug Thornton and then chief of staff to Governor Mike Foster, Stephen Perry, along with other local leaders, were some incredible salesmen. Oh, and co-owner of the Hornets, Ray Wooldridge, was willing to give the city a chance. He and his partner, George Shen, were just spurned by voters in Charlotte that would have built a new downtown arena. So Shen and Wooldridge began to look elsewhere with well-publicized trips to Norfolk, Virginia, St. Louis, Louisville, and Anaheim. And I'm sure they were thinking of a couple other places. But according to a story written by my friend and former colleague John Reed in the Times-Picayune on May 11, 2002, when Wooldridge told Shen he was going to New Orleans to take a look, Shen said, "I said New Orleans? A couple of teams tried to go there and they backed out. The Jazz left too. Do you think that will work?" Ray said he was going to check it out. And I said, "Well, I think you're wasting your time." He called back and said he believed he could get a good deal, unquote. Shen said his eyes were soon to open up to the New Orleans market, but that was far from the end of it. The city had to come up with a whole lot that seemed almost impossible. They had to sell 8,000 season tickets, 2,450 club seats, and 54 suites, and had just a couple of months to do so. When the original deadline hit, they weren't even close. So then Commissioner David Stern gave the city 2 more weeks to hit the numbers. With 9 days left, they still had to sell 1,000 club seats. Somehow, some way, they came through. And with a vote of 28-1 by the NBA's Board of Governors, only then Memphis Grizzlies owner Michael Helsley voted against it. To hell with that guy. The move was approved. On April 13th, 2012, Tom Benson bought the team for $338 million. They're reportedly worth $2.5 billion today. Is that a good return on your investment? 12 years? Sounds pretty good. Soon after, he rebranded them the Pelicans, and almost immediately, the Charlotte Bobcats, remember them? Michael Jordan? Charlotte Bobcats. They retook the name Hornets. How differently would this sports landscape of this city look if George Shen and Ray Wooldridge picked Norfolk or St. Louis or whatever city instead of us? A lot different. Last comment of the day. I'm not sure how to pronounce your first name. Fayon? They need to cut their losses with Trevor. No need to. There's no need to cut your losses with Trevor. He's on a rookie contract. I've been as critical of Trevor Penning as anyone. No need to cut him. He's on his rookie contract. You're not going to cut him. No reason to. Give him 2 more years. Then in 2 years, if he stinks, then you cut him. He's only making $1 million this year. I think like 1.2 2 years from now. Not going to cut him. See what you got. Maybe he can be left guard. Saints got to get a free agent in, whether it's David Bakhtiari or somebody else. I think they just have to get a free agent there. My opinion. That is going to wrap it up for this Friday and a very interesting week. I want to thank today's guest, Sean Fazende. And as always, we thank Gabe Henderson behind the scenes, cutting up them clips. Go check us out. YouTube, cutting them out, putting them on TikTok. We're on Twitter. Facebook, you can find me. Check it out. We hope you can join us next Monday when we will welcome in former LSU baseball Tiger Cade Beloso to the show. That'll be fun. Next week is going to be a lot of fun because Monday we'll be talking about a few different things. We'll talk about LSU baseball. What did Paul Skeens do against the Cubs? We're going to be talking about more Saints. All of that coming up Monday. And then Wednesday and Friday will be straight Saints. Wednesday we'll be previewing the schedule release that night. I'm pretty sure I know who my guest is, but I don't want to say it just yet. And then Thursday morning, instead of Friday next week, the show will be Thursday because we will be going through the schedule with a fine-tooth comb, and I will give you an early prediction. Rod Walker is going to be on that show. Again, got to have a great start. A reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell to receive notifications. Please take 1 second. Go to YouTube. Go to find the Dattitude podcast. Dattitude at Dattitude Pod on YouTube. Click subscribe. That's all you got to do. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. and find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. I want to thank, man, we had a ton of comments and questions from multiple people today. Thank you all for being a part of the show. That's what we want every show. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, of course, except next week, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday because of the Saints schedule release. But come on. We want you to talk. We're going to talk back to you. That's how you can become a part of the show. We thank you for doing that. Everyone have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. Go out and pamper all the moms out there. They deserve it. We will see you on Monday. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.